You say you're lazy, but the truth is far more uncomfortable than that. Laziness is often just fear wearing comfortable clothes. Fear of failing, fear of being judged, fear of discovering what you're actually capable of. Because once you know your true potential, you lose the excuse to play small. Every day you delay, every time you choose the easy option, you are not resting. You are rehearsing a life that will never change. And deep down, you know it. There's a voice inside you that gets quieter each time you ignore it, each time you say tomorrow instead of now. So this isn't about productivity or waking up early or forcing motivation. This is about honesty. This is about the moment you stop lying to yourself and realize that the cost of staying the same is far greater than the effort it takes to change. Laziness is not a permanent trait. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken. What you call laziness is often a quiet decision to avoid what feels hard, unfamiliar, or uncomfortable. The mind will always try to protect you from strain, from risk, from the possibility of failure, because comfort feels safe. But comfort is also where progress slowly suffocates. Every time you choose the easier path, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle more, that effort is something to fear instead of something that builds you. Over time, that belief hardens into identity, and you start introducing yourself to the world as someone who just isn't driven, when in reality, you've simply practiced stopping. You're not always tired because your body is exhausted. You're tired because your purpose has been inactive. There is a different kind of energy that only shows up when you commit to movement. Think about the days when you actually forced yourself to act despite resistance, how momentum began to replace hesitation, how clarity followed action. Effort awakens something inside you that waiting never will. The longer you stay still, the heavier everything feels. Decisions become harder, starting feels impossible, and even small tasks look overwhelming. Not because they are, but because inactivity has weakened your tolerance for discomfort. Avoidance feels harmless in the moment, but it quietly shapes your future. Each postponed task, each "I'll do it later," each hour spent escaping instead of engaging becomes evidence your mind uses against you. It starts building a case that you are someone who doesn't finish, doesn't push, doesn't follow through. And once that story takes hold, you begin to live inside it. You lower your expectations, you negotiate with your potential, you convince yourself that wanting more is unrealistic. Meanwhile, time keeps moving, indifferent to whether you use it or waste it. Growth has never been found in ease. It exists in the friction, in the resistance, in the moments when every part of you wants to stop, but you decide to continue anyway. That decision, small, quiet, almost invisible, is where change begins. Not in grand gestures or sudden bursts of motivation, but in the ordinary moments where you prove to yourself that you can do what is uncomfortable. The first step will feel unnatural, the second slightly less. And eventually, what once felt impossible becomes part of who you are. You don't need to transform overnight. You need to stop rehearsing the lie that you can't. Because the truth is, capability grows through use, not intention. Action rewrites identity. The moment you interrupt the pattern, even once, you send a different message to yourself, that you are not stuck, not weak, not defined by yesterday's choices. You are simply out of practice, and practice can begin at any time. Motivation is unreliable because it is tied to emotion, and emotions change without warning. Some days you wake up energized, convinced you can take on anything, and other days even the simplest task feels heavy. If you depend on motivation, your progress will always rise and fall with your mood. That's why so many people start strong and disappear quietly. They mistake the spark for the engine. Discipline, on the other hand, does not ask how you feel before it moves. It operates on decision, not desire. It turns action into something non-negotiable, like brushing your teeth or showing up where you're expected. When something becomes a standard instead of a choice, excuses lose their power. Waiting to feel ready is one of the most effective ways to stay exactly where you are. Readiness is a myth that keeps you comfortable while time keeps passing. The people who move forward are not the ones who feel motivated every day. They are the ones who trained themselves to act regardless of internal resistance. They understand that feelings often follow behavior, not the other way around. Once you begin, resistance weakens. The hardest part is almost always the moment before you start, when your mind offers 1,000 alternatives that seem easier, softer, safer. Discipline is built in the quiet moments no one applauds. It is choosing to continue when stopping would be easier and invisible to everyone else. It is honoring commitments you made to yourself, even when there is no immediate reward. Over time, these small acts accumulate into trust, not from others, but from you toward yourself. You begin to believe your own promises. You stop negotiating with tasks that matter. Confidence grows not from talent or luck, but from repeated evidence that you can rely on your own behavior. There will be days when everything in you resists structure, when distractions feel irresistible and effort feels pointless. Those are the days discipline matters most. Anyone can act when it's convenient. Consistency reveals itself when it's not. Each time you follow through despite discomfort, you weaken the habit of avoidance and strengthen the habit of action. You teach your mind that difficulty is not a stop sign, just a signal that you are stepping beyond what is familiar. A disciplined life is not rigid or joyless. It is freeing. When you no longer debate whether you will act, you conserve energy that used to be wasted on hesitation. Progress becomes steady instead of sporadic. You stop relying on bursts of inspiration and start building something durable. Motivation may ignite the beginning, but discipline carries you across the distance. In the end, the people who change their lives are not the most inspired. They are the most consistent, the ones who decided that showing up would no longer depend on how they felt that day. Comfort feels harmless because it doesn't hurt, doesn't challenge, doesn't demand anything from you. It wraps itself around your routines and convinces you that staying where you are is safe, reasonable, even deserved. But comfort has a hidden cost. It quietly shrinks your world. The more you protect yourself from difficulty, the less capable you become of handling it. What once felt manageable starts to feel overwhelming, not because life got harder, but because you stopped testing your strength. A comfort zone is not a place where you recharge. It's a place where your abilities slowly go unused. Every time you choose the familiar over the necessary, you reinforce a silent message. That discomfort is something to avoid rather than something to walk through. You begin to design your days around ease, around what requires the least effort, the least risk, the least exposure. At first, it feels like control, but eventually it becomes limitation. Opportunities start to look intimidating. Challenges feel personal, and growth seems reserved for other people who appear braver or more capable. In reality, they are simply more practiced at being uncomfortable. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is evidence that you are stretching beyond what is known. The moment you step into something uncertain, your mind reacts as if you are in danger, urging you to retreat to what is predictable. If you listen every time, your world stays small enough to manage, but too small to fulfill you. If you resist that urge, even briefly, you begin to expand what feels possible. The boundaries that once seemed solid start to move. Tasks that used to intimidate you become routine, and the confidence you were waiting for starts to build from experience rather than imagination. Staying comfortable also creates a quiet kind of regret. It doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates slowly in the background. It shows up in the moments when you wonder what might have happened if you had tried, spoken up, taken the risk, endured the temporary discomfort for the sake of something meaningful. Regret is heavier than effort because it carries the weight of lost chances. Effort, at least, leaves you stronger, even if the outcome isn't perfect. Growth demands friction. It asks you to tolerate awkward beginnings, slow progress, and the vulnerability of not being immediately good at something. The people who evolve are not those who avoid discomfort, but those who stop interpreting it as a warning to quit. They understand that strength is not built in ease. Courage is not formed in safety, and resilience does not develop in stillness. Each time you move toward what feels challenging instead of away from it, you reclaim a little more of your potential. Your comfort zone will always invite you back because it requires nothing from you. But the life you want exists outside of it, in the space where effort replaces avoidance and action replaces hesitation. The moment you stop choosing comfort as your default, you stop training yourself to stay small and start proving to yourself that you were never meant to remain there. There is a quiet realization that changes everything, and it's not dramatic or loud. It's the moment you understand that no one is coming to rescue you from the life you don't like. No perfect opportunity is on its way. No sudden burst of clarity that will make everything easy. No person who will arrive and carry the weight you've been avoiding. Waiting can feel productive because it gives you the illusion that change is forming somewhere outside of you. But time does not solve inaction. It only exposes it. The days pass whether you move or not, and eventually you're forced to confront how much of your life has been spent hoping instead of doing. Depending on rescue keeps you passive. It teaches you to look outward for solutions that can only be built inward. You start believing that once circumstances improve, once someone notices you, once the right moment appears, then you'll begin. But the truth is that beginnings rarely announce themselves. They are created by decision, often in imperfect conditions, often without certainty. The people who transform their lives are not the ones who were saved. They are the ones who accepted responsibility before they felt ready. Responsibility can feel heavy because it removes the comfort of blame. When you stop pointing at circumstances, at other people, at bad timing, you are left with yourself, your choices, your effort, your willingness to endure difficulty. That can be uncomfortable, but it is also empowering. Because if you are responsible, then you are also capable of change. Your progress is no longer dependent on luck or permission. It becomes a direct result of what you choose to do next. Action does not require confidence. It creates it. The first step often feels small and almost insignificant, but it breaks the illusion of helplessness. Once you move, you realize that the barrier was never as solid as it seemed. Momentum begins to replace hesitation. Problems that looked overwhelming start to divide into manageable pieces. You stop asking who will help you and start asking what you can do now. That shift alone can alter the direction of your life. There will still be obstacles, setbacks, moments when the effort feels unfair or exhausting. Taking responsibility does not make the path easy. It makes it yours. And there is a different kind of strength that comes from knowing you are no longer waiting to be saved. You become more resilient because you stop expecting comfort. You become more resourceful because you stop assuming someone else will solve it. Independence grows quietly, built from repeated proof that you can face difficulty without retreating. Your life changes the moment. Waiting stops being your strategy. Not because everything suddenly falls into place, but because you finally step into the role you were avoiding. You stop being a spectator of your own potential and start participating in it. No one was meant to carry you indefinitely. At some point, you have to stand, even if your legs shake, even if your steps are uncertain, because the only real rescue is the one you create through action, through ownership, through the refusal to remain where you are any longer. Excuses rarely sound like weakness when you say them out loud. They sound reasonable, responsible, even intelligent. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time, the right resources, the right mindset, the right support. You convince yourself that your reasons are different, that your situation is more complicated than everyone else's. And maybe some of that is true. But an excuse doesn't have to be false to be destructive. It just has to keep you still. While you explain why you can't move yet, time keeps moving without asking for your permission. What makes excuses dangerous is how protective they feel. They shield you from judgment, from failure, from the discomfort of trying and not succeeding immediately. They allow you to preserve the image of what you could be without risking the reality of what you are right now. As long as you don't fully commit, you never have to face the possibility that effort might be messy, slow, or imperfect. But that protection comes at a cost. Every excuse is a quiet agreement to trade long-term growth for short-term relief. Over time, excuses become a habit of thinking. You stop looking for solutions and start scanning for reasons why something won't work. Your focus shifts from possibility to limitation. Even opportunities begin to look like burdens because they threaten the comfort of staying the same. You might not notice it happening, but your world starts to shrink to match the boundaries of your justifications. What once felt like temporary delays become permanent patterns. There is also a subtle loss of self-respect that comes with repeated avoidance. Each time you promise yourself you'll start tomorrow and don't, a small fracture forms in the trust you have in your own word. You begin to doubt your ability to follow through, to endure discomfort, to finish what you begin. This doubt doesn't appear dramatically. It seeps in quietly until you start lowering your expectations of yourself, just to avoid disappointment. Potential fades not because it was never there, but because it was never used. Breaking the cycle requires honesty that can feel uncomfortable at first. It means acknowledging that some of the barriers are real, but many of them have been reinforced by repetition rather than necessity. It means choosing action before certainty, effort before confidence, progress before perfection. The moment you stop explaining and start doing, even in small ways, the power of excuses begins to weaken. They lose their authority when they are no longer obeyed. You don't eliminate excuses by waiting for them to disappear. You outgrow them by refusing to let them decide for you. Action exposes how much was possible all along. The energy that used to be spent on justification becomes fuel for movement. And with each step forward, you rebuild trust in yourself, not through words, but through evidence. Eventually, the reasons that once held you back start to look smaller, not because life got easier, but because you stopped using them as a place to hide. Confidence is often treated like a prerequisite, something you must possess before you begin. You tell yourself that once you feel sure, fearless, prepared, then you'll take the first step. But confidence doesn't appear in advance. It is built through evidence. It grows from doing something uncertain and realizing you survived it, learned from it, and can do it again. Waiting for confidence before action is like waiting to become strong before lifting anything heavy. The strength comes from the lifting, not from thinking about it. The first attempt at anything meaningful usually feels awkward. You are hyper-aware of your mistakes, your limitations, the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That discomfort convinces you that you're not ready, when in reality, it is proof that you've stepped into unfamiliar territory. Every skilled person you admire once stood at that exact point, unsure and inexperienced. What separated them was not an absence of doubt, but a willingness to proceed despite it. They allowed action to teach them what preparation alone never could. When you act repeatedly, something subtle begins to shift. The task that once felt intimidating becomes manageable, then familiar, then almost routine. Your mind stops sounding alarms because it recognizes that you are not in danger, just in growth. Confidence starts to form quietly, not as arrogance or certainty, but as calm capability. You no longer need to convince yourself you can handle it because you have proof. Each completed effort becomes a reference point your mind can return to when doubt resurfaces. Avoiding action has the opposite effect. The longer you delay, the more intimidating the task appears in your imagination. You build it into something larger than it really is, rehearsing failure without ever testing reality. This creates a cycle where inaction feeds insecurity, and insecurity justifies further inaction. Breaking that cycle requires a decision to move before you feel prepared, to accept imperfection as part of the process rather than a sign you should stop. Small actions matter more than dramatic ones because they are repeatable. You don't need a surge of courage to take a manageable step, but that step begins to change how you see yourself. Instead of someone who hesitates, you become someone who engages. Identity shifts through behavior. The person you become is shaped less by what you intend to do and more by what you consistently practice doing, even when it feels insignificant at the time. There will still be moments of doubt, even after progress. Confidence is not a permanent state. It requires maintenance through continued action. If you stop moving, hesitation slowly returns. But once you understand where confidence truly comes from, you stop chasing the feeling and start relying on the process. You trust that showing up, trying again, and staying in motion will rebuild what uncertainty tries to erode. In the end, readiness was never something you had to wait for. It was something you created each time you chose to begin. Your life is shaped less by the big decisions you make once in a while, and more by the small actions you repeat every day. What you do daily becomes your direction, whether you notice it or not. Habits are quiet architects. They build your future in the background while you focus on the present moment. When your days are filled with delay, distraction, and avoidance, your future absorbs those patterns. Nothing dramatic happens overnight, but slowly the gap widens between the life you imagine and the life you are actually creating. Consistency works both ways. It can either construct something meaningful or reinforce stagnation. It's easy to underestimate a single unproductive day because it feels insignificant on its own. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, that you'll compensate tomorrow, that you needed the break. But days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually you realize that what you called temporary has become routine. The cost isn't just lost time, it's lost momentum. Starting again feels harder because you're not beginning from rest, you're beginning from inertia. Meanwhile, someone else who chose small daily effort has quietly moved ahead, not through extraordinary talent, but through steady repetition. Daily discipline doesn't require intensity, it requires presence. It is showing up even when progress feels slow, even when results are invisible, even when no one is watching. The actions may seem minor, a little practice, a little learning, a little improvement, but they accumulate in ways that are difficult to see in the moment. One day, you look back and realize that what felt like tiny steps have carried you somewhere entirely different. Progress rarely announces itself while it's happening, it reveals itself in hindsight. Lazy habits are dangerous because they disguise themselves as comfort. They promise relief now while quietly borrowing from your future. Each time you choose ease over effort, you reinforce a pattern that will eventually limit you. Opportunities will come, but you won't feel prepared. Challenges will arise, but you won't feel capable. Regret doesn't come from failing after trying. It comes from knowing you could have tried and didn't. It's the awareness that the outcome might have been different if your daily choices had been different. The power of daily action is that it keeps possibility alive. Even on difficult days, a small step forward prevents the feeling of being stuck. It reminds you that change is still in motion, that you are not passively waiting for life to improve. Momentum builds quietly, turning effort into habit and habit into identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who moves, someone who follows through, someone who doesn't let a single mood dictate an entire direction. Your future is not decided in distant moments of inspiration. It is decided in the ordinary hours you are living right now. The routines you repeat, the standards you accept, the effort you give when it would be easier not to. These are the forces shaping what lies ahead. When you understand that, each day stops feeling disposable. It becomes an opportunity to either reinforce the person you used to be or invest in the person you are becoming. Every choice carries a form of discomfort, even the choice to do nothing. Effort has a weight to it, the strain of pushing past resistance, the frustration of slow progress, the exhaustion that comes from giving more than what feels comfortable. It asks for energy now, for focus now, for patience now. That kind of pain is immediate and undeniable, which is why so many people avoid it. It's easier to postpone effort than to confront it. Easier to promise yourself you'll start later than to accept the difficulty of beginning today. But postponement doesn't erase pain. It simply transforms it into something quieter and far more persistent. The pain of regret is different. It doesn't arrive with noise or urgency. It settles in slowly, almost unnoticed, as days pass and opportunities close. It shows up in the questions you can't answer. What would have happened if you had tried? If you had endured the temporary discomfort? If you had trusted yourself enough to risk failure? Regret lingers because it has no resolution. You can't go back and test the path you avoided. You can only imagine the version of yourself that might have existed if you had chosen differently. That uncertainty becomes heavier over time, not lighter. Effort, on the other hand, always gives something back. Even when the outcome isn't what you hoped for, you gain experience, resilience, clarity about your limits and your strengths. The struggle itself reshapes you. Tasks that once felt overwhelming become manageable because you've proven you can endure them. Your tolerance for difficulty expands, and with it, your sense of what is possible. The pain of effort fades as soon as the work is done, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that you showed up despite resistance. Avoiding effort creates a fragile comfort. It feels good in the moment, but it leaves you unprepared for the demands that life will inevitably place on you. Challenges don't disappear because you ignore them. They wait until they are unavoidable. And when that moment comes, the absence of practice makes everything feel harder than it needed to be. You realize that the strength you could have built gradually must now be summoned all at once. Choosing effort is not about punishing yourself. It's about investing in a future version of you that will benefit from what you do today. It is a form of respect for your own potential. Each time you lean into difficulty instead of retreating, you shorten the distance between who you are and who you could become. The work may be uncomfortable, even discouraging at times, but it is honest. It moves you forward instead of holding you in place. In the end, you don't get to choose whether life will involve pain, you only get to choose which kind. One form passes through you and leaves you stronger, more capable, more certain of your ability to endure. The other stays with you, whispering about chances not taken and effort not given. When you understand that both paths demand a price, the decision becomes clearer. Temporary discomfort is far easier to carry than a lifetime of wondering what might have been. Feelings are powerful because they feel real, immediate, and unavoidable. When your body or mind protests, it can sound convincing. You're too tired. You've done enough. Wait until tomorrow. Those words are seductive because they come wrapped in truth. You do feel fatigue, boredom, or frustration. But feelings are not facts. They are signals, not commands. They are designed to protect you from danger, not to guide you toward growth. And if you listen to them without questioning, you will limit yourself quietly, unknowingly, day after day. What feels impossible in the moment is often only temporary resistance, a passing signal that your comfort is being challenged. Purpose, on the other hand, is persistent. It does not depend on mood, emotion, or energy. Purpose is the quiet voice that reminds you why you started, why you keep going, why the discomfort matters. It calls you to action even when your body and mind protest. The people who accomplish extraordinary things don't act because they feel ready or because their emotions are aligned. They act because their vision, their responsibility, or their commitment demands movement. Feeling reluctant is normal, but it is not a reason to stop. Action precedes feeling, not the other way around. You are capable of more than your feelings allow because capability is not measured by comfort. Strength is built through challenge, endurance through resistance, and courage through action despite fear. Every time you act when your mind tells you to rest, you expand the limits of what you believe is possible. You discover reserves you didn't know existed. What seemed unbearable at first becomes manageable with repeated exposure. Feelings are temporary, but the skills, confidence, and resilience you gain by pushing past them are permanent. Avoiding movement because of feelings is a subtle form of self-sabotage. It whispers that your potential is secondary to your comfort, that growth is negotiable, and that delay will not cost you. But every choice to rest when action is required compounds into lost opportunities. Days, weeks, and years of small postponements accumulate, creating a version of life that is shaped more by avoidance than by ambition. Purpose does not wait for readiness. It thrives in the tension between what feels easy and what must be done.